Hi, this is Holly Brockwell for ShinyShiny, and this is the ASUS ZenFone 5. So you might have seen that we recently reviewed the ZenFone 6 and the ZenFone 4, which are in the same range, and you might have guessed by the names are 6 inches and 4 inches in the screen, and this one is the 5-inch version. So I feel like Goldilocks, you know, I've had my giant phone and my tiny phone and my medium-sized phone. You probably won't be surprised to hear that the medium-sized one is actually my favourite. So I'm a really big fan of the ZenFone 5. I've been using it for a couple of weeks now and I'm so impressed. It's £199 SIM-free, which is pretty cheap, you know, that puts it on kind of the low end of mid-range. And for that, you just get such a lot. I mean, it's kind of competing with the Moto G, which obviously is well known for giving you a lot for not a lot of money. But I think even that is kind of challenged by how much you get for your money on this phone. So first off, taking a look at the handset itself, it's fairly standard looking from the front. You know, you've got 3 soft touch buttons on here, which sadly don't have backlight, but they've got a cut somewhere, and that's a fairly minor place to make a cut. It's got the little concentric circles thing here, which ASUS do quite a lot because it's one of the things that they have on their laptops, so it's kind of a design trademark of theirs. Quite subtle branding. The bezels around the screen are, yeah, not significant, but they are there, you know, they're not the slimmest you've ever seen. And then the back cover, you'll have to forgive me because I've cheated a little bit with this back cover. This is the back cover from the 3G version of the ZenFone 5. So there's two, there's the 3G and the 4G. This is the 4G, which is £199, whereas the 3G is £179. It's not really worth getting for the sake of the extra £20. You might as well have this one because it's much better. But as I say, this is the back cover from the other one because the red is just a little bit more interesting than the black, and my 4G ZenFone 5 is sadly the black one. So you'll see on there it says Intel inside, which is actually technically not true on this model because the 4G version, unlike all the other ZenPhones, has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 400 processor, whereas the others all have Intel processors, which is kind of an ASUS thing. So it's really interesting to see that they've gone in the other direction with this one. I'm not really sure why that is, but the performance on this phone is absolutely fantastic. I've had no problems with it really. I mean, I've really put it through its paces, you know, trying to find lags and hangs and things like that. I've played quite intensive kind of racing games on it. I've multitasked and kind of switched in and out of apps and that kind of thing, and I just haven't had any problems with it. I've basically tried to find a hole in its performance and I haven't found one, so it's done pretty well. I'm quite impressed with that. The hardware on this phone for £200 is really, really good. You get a quad-core Snapdragon 400 processor and 2 gig of RAM, which is especially good because other phones in this price range, they've all got 1 gig, so it's pretty amazing that this one's got 2. You kind of have to go up 100 quid or so to get to the Nexus 5 to find 2 gig in the same or similar kind of price range. So it's pretty great that it has that as well. It's got 16 gig of internal storage, which is twice what you get on the Moto G 4G. And that's also expandable up to 64 gig or buy up to 64 gig with the micro SD slot, which is in the back here under the cover if you can get it off. It runs Android KitKat, which is fantastic. Some of the criticisms of the 3G version of this phone were that it only runs Jelly Bean, although you can't necessarily tell because it does have the ASUS UI over it, so it's not stock Android. So you'll notice there that if you pull down from different sides of the notification bar that you get different things. There's quick settings on the right and notifications on the left. I am just about getting used to this after several weeks of use. It's not my favourite feature. Battery-wise, you get 2100 mAh, which is probably where this one falls down really compared to other phones. I mean, it's still fantastic for a phone in this price range, but because all the other specs are kind of higher than you would expect for this money, I did sort of hope for a bit more from the battery. But, you know, that might be slightly unfair because it is very, very cheap. It's not removable, the battery, unfortunately, so you can't kind of carry a spare or anything like that, but that's getting to be quite standard, so I'm not really going to complain about that. But it would have been nice, just because it's a little bit lower in power than I would have hoped for, it would have been nice to see a removable one. But interestingly, the battery on this one actually performed much better than on the 3G version of the phone. So we ran our usual kind of battery test of streaming a film over Wi-Fi with brightness set to maximum and GPS on for 2 hours. Started with 100% charge and saw where it was at after 2 hours. And on this phone we had 57% left, which is, it's not an amazing result, but it's not terrible. On the other phone, on the 3G version, we only had 40% left, which is actually quite a bad result and is outclassed by kind of phones that cost less than £100. So that's not great. I would definitely recommend getting this one over the other one just because, I mean, it's only £20 more, and for that you get 4G and you get better specs and a kind of Qualcomm processor, which I think a lot of people would prefer over an Intel. So this review is actually being filmed on the ZenFone 5, so if you're wondering about kind of the video quality and things like that, then you should be able to get it from this video. There are 2 cameras on this phone, so you've got a front-facing and a main camera, which is kind of what you'd expect for this price range. The front facing is 2 megapixels, takes perfectly good selfies as long as you've got good lighting, so that's all good. The main one is 8 megapixels. It's a fairly average camera, I'll be honest. You know, it performs fine, it's got autofocus, it's got flash, it works well enough, it's plenty good enough for most of your photo taking needs. But where it really, really stands out is the software, and I've said this about all of the ZenFones. The native camera app is just fantastic. It comes with so many modes, kind of more modes than you would ever need, really. So if we take it off selfie mode, so I can stop looking at my own face, and have a look in the modes here. So you've got all of these modes, look, there's tons of them. So you've got lots of things to choose from, like you've got auto, you've got time rewind, which kind of lets you go back and forwards in time to get people's facial expressions right. You've got HDR, panorama, that's quite standard. Night, low light works really, really well. Beautification mode, which may or may not be something that you want. But the ones that I find really fun are miniature, which is kind of tilt shift. So you can have a look at the full text review, which has got lots of sample photos that show kind of how this works. But it allows you to kind of look at a building or kind of a view and make it look like it's taken with a tilt shift lens, which is quite an expensive camera lens. You can make things look like they're really tiny, and you can kind of shift the focus in the picture, and that's really enjoyable, and I got a little bit addicted to taking pictures with that. And similarly, depth of field, if you're taking a close-up of something, you can use that to blur the background, which again makes it look like it was taken on SLR, makes it look much more expensive than it is. It's not foolproof. Often I've applied the kind of the depth of field mode and then taken a picture, and it's not really worked. It hasn't quite worked out where the background is and what I'm trying to take a picture of, but when it does work, it comes out really well. And then there's Gif Animation, which is another favourite of mine, which allows you to kind of film a GIF essentially, so you can go up to 30 frames, you just film it like a video, and when it reaches 30 frames it'll stop automatically. The file sizes are quite massive, so you'll probably have to do a little bit of editing, either shrink it down or kind of take some frames out to make it fit if you're going to put it on Tumblr or Twitter or anything like that. But it is really fun to do, and again I got quite addicted to doing that. I think it makes such a difference having it in the native app, because obviously there are apps already that you can get that do probably all of these things, possibly better, but just having it there in the native camera app means that you're so much more likely to use it. It means that people are going to discover what depth of field means, going to discover what tilt shift means, and actually have a go on it, whereas they might never hear of an app that does that separately. And I just think it's so much better than kind of having your standard app that's got kind of auto and HDR and then kind of gives up. So I was really, really impressed with the software on this one and on all the ZenFones. It gets a huge thumbs up, and the camera gets much better ratings, I think, because of that. But where the camera fell down for me, and maybe this is a slightly unfair test, but I took it to a music gig, and, well, although the videos came out really, really well, the photos came out really, really well considering how far back I was standing, and again you can see the text review for examples of those. Where it fell down was the microphone. So it wasn't kind of a drum and bass concert or anything like that, it was only pop music, but the microphone was just overwhelmed by kind of bass and volume. So when I got home and watched the videos back, I was really upset to find that none of the sound is usable. It's just kind of, it's loud and kind of roary, and you can't really hear anything. It's pretty terrible. I've put an example video in the review, but it's just really disappointing because, you probably, if you're at a gig, you're probably not going to watch the videos that you've taken back until you get home. You're probably not going to watch them with sound until you get home, and it's not until then that you realise that you've been filming half the night and you can't use any of those videos. They're all pretty terrible, and they don't sound right and you can't hear the music, so that was a real shame, and I've had to take some points off the camera for that. But other than that, it's a pretty good camera. The modes are really what make it, so if you're one that likes to kind of experiment with your photography and try some different effects, then you're going to really enjoy playing with this camera. It is very, very, very good for that. In conclusion then, there is a lot to love about this phone, especially for £199. For that you get fantastic hardware, the performance is brilliant. I don't think it looks like a £200 phone, especially if you get one of the nice kind of metallic colours. The battery is, it's not amazing, but it's perfectly fine. It's going to get you through the day. The camera software is great. So there's a lot to recommend, and probably its closest rival is the Moto G 4G, which obviously also has 4G. It's slightly cheaper, but if you cut your costs and get the Moto G 4G, you're going to lose quite a bit in specs. So for example, it's only got half the internal storage of this one. You can only add a micro SD card up to 32 gig, whereas this one can take 64 gig. It can only record in 720p, whereas this one can do 1080. So you do you lose quite a bit, and although the Moto G 4G does technically have more pixels per inch on the screen, it's also got a slightly smaller screen, so it's actually the same resolution, it's just a 4.5-inch screen instead of a 5. So, you know, swings and roundabouts there, you might have to decide what's more important to you. But I personally would say that in terms of value, this is leagues ahead of pretty much anything we've seen. It's absolutely great for the money, and I really think it's stolen the Moto G's crown for being the best value phone. So I am very impressed, and check out the text review for kind of the full details on how it did in every little point and how it scored. But overall, this is a great phone.